day 16, and interesting day. Didn't do a whole lot in some ways. I was wandering around the left bank, kind of around the area of Musée d'Orsay. Um, just some wandering, yeah. I think I was more surprised by some of my thought process today, which was starting to picture myself as a resident of Paris and what that would mean. And not necessarily because I want to live here, but really because I'm spending an extended time here, because I don't necessarily consider myself a tourist here. What would it mean? And what is this rhythm of life in this city all about? And it took me to a couple different interesting places. And I think, as I've talked about before, I love this digital nomad experience, or what some people would call slow travel. I like the ability to really get integrated into a place and get beyond just all of the attractions and feel like I get to see different corners that you don't get to see when you're only passing through for a few days. I have a regular supermarket and there is great coffee not too far from here. I can always find my way home out of the metro. It feels like a comfortable routine now. And I'm also just trying to absorb what the French culture means. It's a culture that's not particularly loud. It is a culture where people are quite polite. I have not had the experience of feeling like Parisians are rude. Again, perhaps because I'm trying to blend in like a local. I have the advantage of speaking French, but also just trying to take my cues from others and live as a citizen here for the short month that I am here, and what that experience means and how different it feels perhaps than my experience at home. I also realized there's kind of a bit of a trip that I went on, I suppose, a mental trip, in the sense of thinking about if I did live here. And that quickly brought me to a sense of feeling like I would need a certain level of success if I lived here, that it is a bit of a pricey city, obviously, as you can imagine, being as global as it is. And feeling like I needed to have some form of income that would compete with that I couldn't come and live a ordinary Parisian life, or a life where I came and struggled. And so that brought me to places of comparison and competitiveness, and I think ultimately triggered a little bit of where there's feelings of unworthiness, I suppose. I think they will always be there in some way, shape, or form. I think it is my ability to spot them and to know that they are part of the pattern of thinking that I can have. And it can really become a killjoy, I suppose, if I head too far down that spiral, or somehow start to feel pressure for a city I don't actually intend to live in, but just wandering through a thinking exercise of what it could be like to live here, what it means for people that live here. There is a sense of kind of the busyness here and the culture, and I think there are really great aspects of it, and aspects that might not be for me nearly as much. I don't totally buy into the overstressed, oversubscribed, always on the phone, always messaging, making phone calls, always on the go sort of culture. I think that frenetic, frazzled kind of um, way that people can get kind of isn't for me. And um, I understand how it happens in cities. I think there's a lot going on. People often are working longer hours. They're adding a commute onto that, and trying to balance some friendships and relationships in the margins of that as well. And so I totally get it, and yet something that I choose not to have anymore, I think. I don't know that my life is a particularly slow-paced life, but I want the time to be present. And if there's something in terms of contrast of where my life is now compared to where it was a couple of years ago when I was in kind of a hectic corporate role. I feel so much more present. I feel so much more joy and fullness and be able to enjoy myself and not rush through checking boxes or feel that push and that competition, to feel that comparison and wonder if I measure up to others, wonder um, I am not playing the golf game where I'm competing against myself. I am out and out comparing and feeling like if I lived in this city, I would need to compete. And I think there is a part of us as senior leaders that feels that lives that is a part of who we are. We've had to outperform and outcompete others to make our way often up a corporate ladder. The competitions are stiff. The competitors are numerous. And so we need to show in interviews, we need to come with that experience. We need to show that we can do it and that we are motivated and driven and all of those factors. And I think there's still very much parts of me that will always be that way in terms of having a work ethic, in terms of, I think, being driven, about being goal driven at all times. But I think what I've learned and where I've found some balance is in the ability to enjoy the process as much as the outcome. Because I think I used to rush from outcome to outcome to outcome, and they were hollow victories each time, especially because I would often peg some happiness or satisfaction on the next set of outcomes. And when that didn't show up, you just set the next goal instead. And rather than understanding what it could mean to have more fullness, to appreciate an experience, to let go of every moment needing to be productive, I think there was a real sense of next to next to next. And I do sort of associate that with city life, for better or for worse. And so I think it was just such an interesting exercise. And I think it is a side of Paris that I think people see and have different reactions to. I think a lot of people view it as a really sophisticated space to visit, a city that may be far more glamorous than where you live. And I think if you're dropping in for a few days, maybe this is what drives some of that selfie culture, is people want to send their own message of sharing in that sophistication or that beauty or that certain kind of, say, branding that I think Paris has just inherited over time. Because don't get me wrong, there are world-class venues here. There are amazing museums. There are beautiful buildings. There are a few cities where I think the building regulation has been so strict to create such a uniform look and feel to the city that it is worth coming to. It is worth spending time in. And I think any of those global cities can also really have that competitive feel to them. It is like a New York, it is like a London. And I think it is easy to get sucked into that. I know it is for me. I think there's something still kind of seductive about it. The sense of these are places where any dream can come true, where you're likely to be able to cross paths with all sorts of amazing people, where a certain degree of creativity and artisticness is valued in this city. And there are parts of it that are very, very expensive, and depending on what you buy into, the level of luxury that is available to you, if that is your world, is unprecedented in some ways. Again, there are just a handful of cities around in the world that offer the level of hotels that are here, the level of shopping that is here, of jewelry, of clothes, of all of those things. And I think in isolation, walking past a shop, seeing a particular ad, I think I can kind of not get sucked into that luxury piece. I've never been a big luxury person, but I think something about being in the city, about seeing window after window, or the black Mercedes, all with drivers, or just the sense of it is a city of being seen, that I can quickly tip over into that sense of competitiveness. And how often for any of us do we find those spaces? Do we feel like if we're going to succeed, we have to succeed at a level? There is no kind of 65% for me. It's like, if I'm going to compete, I'm going to compete against the best. If I'm going to be here, then I just don't want to make a couple $100,000. I need to be making $1 million or a couple million a year, sort of thing. And that's the level of comparison that seems to show up for me. There's the sense of competing at the top or not competing at all. And again, that may show up for you. That may be kind of a part of occupying executive roles, because there is an aspect of that we have not settled in a particular place in our career. We have not stopped wanting to grow, stopped wanting to be challenged, maybe until now. And I think this is some of where that contrast can show up as well, that early in our careers, we really aspired to something. We've made really strong headway towards it. And at least at that career level, that starts to fade a little bit. That mirage starts to disappear a little bit. And we realize that we could keep proceeding along that career ladder. We could work even harder, put in even more hours, be even more selfless and more dedicated to our careers. But at what cost? And I also have the wherewithal to realize, as I go on that mental trip here in Paris, that a lot of that really is just a thinking pattern, a fleeting fantasy, and that certainly if I had planned to spend a year here rather than just a month here, a lot of that glitz and glamour would certainly disappear. And I've worked with it enough, and I am aware enough of my patterns that I can look at it and go, yeah, sure, would be nice. And I also recognize the flaw in my own thinking, I suppose, or at least the human aspect of wanting that exists within it, but not getting sucked into it enough to take some sort of drastic action, or to then beat myself up for not hitting some invisible bar, or being determined that I'm going to somehow succeed here, when there's a real question about whether this is where I would want to be. As they say, I think this is a great digital nomad space. Is this somewhere where I want to be living? I'm not so sure. I think that continues to develop over this 30-day period, and there are absolutely aspects of it that are amazing. I think I've continued to highlight different parts of those, and I think there will be all sorts of wonderful things that I miss when I'm gone. But I don't think that there is, at a deep heart level and soul level, something that calls to me that says that this is home. I think I'm still searching for that in a global way. I think I'm still trying to figure that out. I don't feel like this is what checks the boxes, but that doesn't mean that I'm not incredibly grateful to spend a month here. It's not to say that I wouldn't come back for another month. I think there's a different perception, a different set of expectations, a different experience that I'm looking for. But I also think it's good to go through those other exercises of realizing those moments. Those moments will show up for me in all sorts of places around the world. They'll show up for me in my own home community. And this is that renegotiation period in our lives, and realizing that perhaps there's a certain habit that's developed over years for me around that comparison, around the dreams, the aspirations of where I want it to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. We should have dreams. We should have goals. I think we want to always be moving towards something. But I'm very, very cautious, and more than ever less buying into coupling my self-worth with some of those external accolades. And I think that's the moment of realization where I kind of had to back away and kind of go, yeah, great, great mental trip, great fantasy, and my self-worth is getting more and more non-negotiable. And so to put that kind of pressure, or to say that I would only be successful if certain things happened, that's where it all kind of started to fall apart. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for it being able to fall apart in that moment and to come back to reality and to kind of shrug it off and say, sure, and back to my digital nomad experience and back to a really extended, slow travel period here. And that allows me to find that joy back, to find those moments back, to find a certain appreciation, to enjoy the new and the novel of getting to see places that are somewhat beyond the general tourist area, and also just develop a great familiarity with the city. So the city makes more and more sense to me as I learn about its history, as I learn about just how different things are spaced around the city and the relationship between them each. I love that part of it. I absolutely love feeling like I can settle into the city, and that this isn't kind of that surface level 48 hours in whatever city where you get to see a couple of attractions and get a bit of a flavor of the city, but you never really connect with the city. And I think I'm grateful to be connecting with Paris in a deeper way, to really feel like I get to know it. I suppose this is the difference between, the first date, where there's a fair bit of infatuation and curiosity and desperately hoping that you get that call for a second date, and starting to get to know somebody a little bit better over a month and understanding who they are and what's important to them and how they function, and hopefully start to see that there is some humanness there, that they have their flaws like everybody else. I hope that's what I can present to the world, is there is no shortage of flaws and areas to work on and things that have to be accepted, because if I'm this far into my life, they're probably not going to change. And I'm okay with all of those. And so that is the process that unfolds. That is the experience of this month here. And I'm glad that I get to share it with you. I'm glad that I'm able to talk about all of the things that trigger my thinking in this time. And that, as I've said from the beginning, this is not a look at me, I'm in Paris, and this is not a travel blog, as you've very clearly figured out. You get a bit of a taste about where I'm hanging out, and more so, hopefully you get a little bit more insight into kind of what my thoughts are in this process. And hopefully it's asking some questions in you and demonstrating to you that this is possible for you if this is what you want in your life. And it's not going to be bliss every moment of an extended vacation, but it will be meaningful, and that's the more important part. And so, as always, what do you want? What do you want next? Knowing where you are, knowing what your current priorities are, and what does your experience need to look like, and how are you going to start moving in that direction? Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.